to have our work share the stage with the works of these two titans is unimaginable.
We are still kind of like pinching ourselves at that.
Of love and loss, inspiring the title Only Light Years Away is also the opportunity for us to think about the intimacy that comes with the unknown when you venture to love someone, and when you contend with losing that someone. In a way, we are compelled to a type of intimacy with the unknown through love and through loss. The idea of only light years away is trying to be hopeful and suggesting that something that feels impossible or too big, to try to bring it back to something that we can manage and hold on to.
We chose to use the projection elements to also bring the audience closer with the performers. We wanted to kind of also try to find a way to find a type of intimacy that we could connect what we see these amazing physical artists do with like a little bit more of who they are. The imagery and the way that the images are displayed in the work aren't on a solid surface, they're almost kind of floating in space. It kind of lends itself to the themes of fragility and also the vulnerability of the human experience of life itself.
So you get hit, you get twisted. Yeah, so the feeling is like you're going to her, but the mound hits you. The climate is created by the video light, but it feels like it also could be sort of psychological wilderness. So the audience is kind of seeing that flail, and then there's the possibility for more flailing as you...
We often are asking dancers to kind of reach the outer limit of their thresholds physically, the edge of their kinesphere, something that provokes their reflexes or their instincts to have to react.
Right now we're in this in-between phase where all the materials are starting to take form. The whole team, especially the dancers, are really generous with us. They are generous in this place of mystery, of creation, really willing to work with what you don't know yet about material. It's felt abundant and there's been lots of chemistry. They've been good to us. Yeah, gorgeous. Thanks, folks.